Welcome to Season 18 of Marrow Masters, produced for the National Bone Marrow Transplant Link and sponsored by Sanofi and Jazz Pharmaceuticals. This season is all about the caregivers. Our guests will offer up their best tips, experiences, and advice. We'll cover the importance of self-care and share heartwarming stories of compassion and love. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the NBMT Link, Peggy Burkhardt.
Welcome, everyone. So today we have with us Daniel Medina of Broomfield, Colorado. Daniel was a caregiver several years ago to his wife, Miley, and Daniel's going to share his experience with us today. Welcome, Daniel.
Hey, Peggy. Thanks for having me.
So, Daniel, please tell us about your wife, Miley's diagnosis in 2021. What was it like coping initially with this big change in your lives?
Yeah, she was, 2021. So at the time she was 27, I believe.
Wow.
So fairly young. And it was the summer. We play a lot of volleyball in the summer. We travel and she plays beach volleyball tournaments throughout the mountains here in Colorado. And there was one tournament in particular where she was getting towards the finals and there was a ball that was coming towards her that she was going to dig. And she just felt like my body can't go. And this is different than regular fatigue. This is really weird sort of thing. Bless her heart, she played volleyball the next day. And then we get back down home and she's going up the stairs and she's just I can hardly get up the stairs. Something's going on. So
okay.
She went into the urgent care from there. Urgent care runs blood work and they come back to her and they say, this looks like it could be cancer. They were just very straight up with her. So she calls me, very panicked and, naturally upset by this. And I'm the anxiety-riddled, panicky one of the two of us.
Great.
So when she panics, it's full-blown panic for me as well. So I get over there as fast as I can. At this point in time, we have a daughter who is 3 years old. And actually, she was almost 3 at this point, so she was still 2. And fortunately, we had family in town watching her.
Okay.
So very fortunate in that regard. Go to the urgent care and they're like, you need to go to the hospital, right now. This is pretty bad sort of thing. So from that moment, we're sitting there kind of talking about what this looks like. They won't let her leave the urgent care, to go see her daughter, to go pack her bags, anything. They were like, you have to go straight to the hospital. It took them probably, 8 to 10 hours to get a room ready for us. So we were just sitting in the urgent care kind of ruminating about this, terrible news that we had just received and kind of trying to decide what the best path forward was. At this point in time, I worked for a biomedical device company out of Golden, Colorado called BioIntelliSense. And the CEO is a big cardiologist, cardiac surgeon. So I call him and say, hey, I don't know what work looks like moving forward. My wife, potentially has some sort of blood cancer is all we knew at this point. And he says, well, I know the head of blood cancer at UC Health. Is that where you're going? I said, yeah. So he's like, okay, give me a few minutes. And he calls him. And so Dr. Clay, who's the head of blood cancers there at UC Health, calls me.
Really?
On my phone and says, hey, we're going to get you a bed within a couple hours here. Just leave the urgent care. We'll take care of you sort of thing. And so that was a relationship I was very fortunate to have. I don't think that's normal by any means to know the person in charge of the blood cancer at the place that you're going to. But she moved into the hospital that night and she didn't leave for probably 6 weeks at that point.
Okay.
It was a few days before my birthday. It was a few days before our anniversary, all these different milestones. And she was going to be confined into a hospital bed going through consolidation chemotherapy initially. We decided on doing that as opposed to a bone marrow transplant. But the spoiler to that story is the cancer came back once her mutations were detected. And at that point, we decided to do the bone marrow transplant after her initial relapse.
And what year was that?
The transplant happened in 2022.
Okay.
So she made it about a full year before we detected the mutations again that signaled that relapse was on its way.
Okay. And since then, how is she doing?
She is better than ever, honestly.
Great.
She's more healthy and more fit than I've ever seen her. She has got this energy and drive that I'm envious of every day. I mentioned at the beginning, she's opening a third coffee shop and she wakes up before me. They're painting and doing construction and she still finds time to play with our daughter and spend time with her. Someone called her last minute last night and was like, hey, we need a sub for volleyballs. And she played volleyball and came home, went to bed, and she does this on a daily basis. It's pretty incredible to watch.
That is very inspiring. And I know that listeners right now are grinning and loving this because this is what we need more of, Daniel. We need these stories where it's worth it. It's hard stuff, but look at the end result. Look at how well Miley's doing. This just makes me so happy for you and your family. So, Daniel, this season's on caregiving. So we're going to get a male perspective here. What was it like caring for your spouse throughout the process, the chemo, the stay at the hospital? What was that like for you?
Yeah. When we first got the diagnosis and started going through the chemo and things like that, it was particularly difficult with our young daughter in that we decided she was most important, first and foremost. We don't want to instill some sort of trauma on her, having mom be gone, and, do our best to make it seem as normal as possible for her. However, she's even at her young age, she's very independent and empathic and, all these things. And so she clued into it very quickly. But we did our best to kind of pretend that life was normal on that front. But then I would also travel to the hospital and visit my wife on a daily basis. And for me, it was, how can I help? What can I do? Because you feel so helpless. There's nothing you or your spouse or anyone can do to make sure the cancer goes away. And there's no more worries or anything like that. Just in the back of my mind, like I said, I'm the anxious one in the relationship. So in the back of my mind, I'm just constantly battling these thoughts of, I hope I don't have to raise my daughter without a mom, sort of thing.
Sure.
And I'm sure Miley was also thinking that, but we would like to pretend that it didn't happen. So things like our anniversary was like 6 days into her hospital stay, and I showed up with little like fake candles and like her favorite food and stuff like that. And we did a little anniversary dinner in the hospital, and we would just try and stay as positive as possible. I don't think that's a prerequisite because I think you can get through it being positive or just barely surviving. Either way, you can get through it the way that you need to get through it. That's just what worked for us. It was hard feeling so helpless, trying to be a normal dad and trying to do anything I could to help Miley. I was always asking the nurses and other people who had experienced this, what can I do? And they would say, just be there.
Yeah.
Just support her, whatever she needs, sort of thing. I found the Cancer Buddy app, and that was really helpful because when you Google, AML, leukemia, outcomes, what people are going through, Google has no sympathy for you whatsoever.
So true.
And it just tells you everyone dies. It's terrible. Everyone's going to die. The outcomes are not good. The problem with Googling things like that is it tells you these point blank facts, but the data is also kind of old at this point. The treatment is a lot better. My wife's situation was a lot different because she was so young. They could use a lot stronger chemotherapy, idarubicin, things like that they wouldn't use for an older person. So while it says only 60% of people live 2 years after going through consolidation chemotherapy, well, that data is based on a much older population, and the data is decades old itself. So then finding the Cancer Buddy app, I got to meet other caregivers and survivors and say, hey, how did you get through it? What can I do? So on and so forth, and interact with these people who are alive and well and experience this, and they can give me advice on how to support Miley and how to be there for her. So that was definitely a blessing to find that application.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that. We think so much of what they do. That is the Bone and Marrow Foundation, and we will be sure to include that in the show notes. It's a fantastic app, and I'm so glad you mentioned it. So, Daniel, to think of your wife as so young when this happened, I just, wow. And I'm so glad that she's doing so well, and she's the Energizer Bunny, and she's just getting through it all. Let's talk about the work-life balance. How did you manage that while you were trying to be at the hospital, trying to raise your daughter? Let's dig in on that.
It's hard. People have their different roles and they kind of delineate responsibilities very differently. And my wife and I are kind of more traditional in that I do the traditional male things and she does the female ones. And that's just how we operate. Not saying it's the correct way to do it, but that was our relationship. So going from the mentality of I'm the provider, I'm the father, like the big strong guy who's, putting up this front sort of thing, to being incredibly vulnerable and inundated with all these emotions where my daughter's not getting to see her mom and she's upset about it.
Mm-hmm.
Mom's in the hospital. We don't know what the future is like and what the outcome's like. And on top of this, the bills aren't going anywhere. I still need to, somehow make income, somehow survive, sort of thing. We were very fortunate to have family nearby and as much support as, we could get from there. I think whether it's family, whether it's friends, anyone you can reach out to, don't be afraid to raise your hand and ask for help.
Sure.
My wife and me, to a certain extent, are people who I suppose we don't like to ask for help and be needy and stuff like that. We're kind of independent in that way. And so it was really difficult to be vulnerable enough to raise my hand and say, hey, I need help. At the workplace, saying, hey, I need some time off to look after my wife. And fortunately, I was able to do that. Miley, owning 2 coffee shops at this point, telling her employees, like, hey, I can't be there to support you like I normally do. You guys, I need your help to get through this. And then family, obviously watching my daughter and things like that. So it was a lot to juggle. I remember feeling very overwhelmed a lot of the times. But fortunately, I worked at Apple for a number of years and they kind of taught us mindfulness meditation and got us into that practice. And it really helped me to, when things are spiraling out of control in my head and just like planning on the future and things that haven't even happened yet. And I can't guarantee they're going to happen, but that's all I can think about, to sort of reel it in and be in the moment and think, okay, as the provider and caretaker, what do I need to do right now? Is it be there for my daughter? Is it just be in the same room as my wife? As chemo knocked her out and she's just laying there asleep, the comfort of when she's awake for 10 seconds between, the chemo naps, seeing that I'm there. It doesn't feel like a lot, but in the moment, that might be the best thing to do. So getting out of your head and deciding what's the best path forward for any given moment that you're in.
Yeah, absolutely, Daniel. And being a male caregiver, to be honest, most of the interviews we do, a lot of females like to, I'm going to say it, they like to talk, they like to be podcasters. We feel so lucky to have your perspective today. Do you feel that as a male husband caregiver, that there were maybe not as many resources? Or I know you mentioned Cancer Buddy, but did you find that there were difficulties being the male caregiver that maybe others didn't experience?
Yeah, probably, because most of the resources I talked to were women. If I did find a male resource, they were usually someone who went through cancer or were going through cancer. It was never really from the caregiver front. And being put in that caregiver position kind of changes the role a little bit. I don't want to say it's emasculating, but I mean, there's a reason why most nurses are female, sort of thing. It just kind of, biologically and historically, the female kind of persona lends to that caregiving sort of thing. So it's a little bit of, role reversal, letting your guard down. And it required an immense amount of vulnerability on my part that was really uncomfortable. I already mentioned like asking for help, but having these moments where I'm like in the hallway bawling my eyes out and like the nurses are, come over and like give me a hug and stuff like that. Like that's not normally something that the typical man likes to let their guard down and happen. It's extremely uncomfortable. But going through that discomfort helped me to be a better caregiver and probably a better person ultimately. I would say it was uncomfortable initially being in that caregiver role, but eventually kind of surrendering to what was required of me helped push me forward and helped me to be a caregiver ultimately.
And how did your buddies react? Did you get a lot of support from your male friends?
Yeah, absolutely. I've never had too many friends in life, but I have a small friend group of like 4 guys and we just text each other every day back and forth. Guys don't really like talk, have conversations. It's just like, hey, what's going on? Oh, I'm fine, cool.
Yeah,
and that's,
true.
That's all we need sort of thing.
Yep.
Guys like to know someone's around, but not necessarily interact with them.
Okay. It's so true. And I think this all my kids are all in their 20s and early 30s, and nobody wants to talk on the phone anymore. Everybody just, I call my son and he texts me back, what's up?
Yep, exactly.
I get it, especially with the boys. My daughter will talk all the time, but I get it. And I appreciate that honesty and just knowing that somebody's reaching out sometimes, even just the few seconds it takes to send a text.
Yep.
To just let somebody know you're thinking of them. Is there anything you need? So I just love this. Thanks for being so honest about the boys.
Exactly. It makes all the difference. Someone just texting and saying, "Hey, you need anything?" And if you don't, just the fact that they did it really can make a difference, I think, especially for males.
Yeah, thank you for this wonderful perspective. So you mentioned that Miley had, do you call it relapse? Would it be a relapse?
It was, yeah, her mutations were gone for her AML. They were completely gone, and then suddenly they popped up again.
Okay.
So it was pretty much inevitable that there was going to be a relapse. And so we decided to get ahead of the ball and do the bone marrow transplant at that point.
Yeah, the longer I do this job, the more I realize that for AML, especially, I think a transplant seems it's almost inevitable at some point. Although I'm sure there are stories out there where people did not need to do that. Let's talk about life after transplant. I know you got something to say about germs. Fill us in.
Yeah, we were afraid of transplant, I think is the best way to put it. Initially, it just seemed so much more overwhelming than just chemo sort of thing. But after, I mean, retrospect is 2020. After going through the transplant, I think that would have been the way to go initially, was to just do that. The biggest risk in transplant is infection. Your bone marrow is wiped out. You don't have any immune system to speak of whatsoever. And so we're going through this. I guess it was almost a blessing that it was during COVID because everyone was wearing masks and like using hand sanitizer and stuff like that. So that certainly helped. But having a 3-year-old who's, playing in the dirt and shoving her hands in her mouth and everything like that. So it became difficult to kind of manage her being able to see mom and also not worry about her getting mom sick sort of thing. On top of that, you're dealing with neutropenic fever. So there's another layer of anxiety there because you get this fever and it could be just neutropenia or it could be an infection, one of which is kind of par for the course and the other could, spell disaster sort of thing. So being super, super diligent and mindful of sanitizing your hands and stuff like that. I mean, she had family come in. Miley had family come in to visit her. And they were doing some sort of procedure. Maybe it was where they test your bone marrow. They puncture your hip bone and take a piece of bone sort of thing.
Okay.
And they were in full hazmat suits hanging out with her while that was happening. And it seems ridiculous, but if you can prevent infection, that's your single worst enemy during transplant. I think it makes the process a lot smoother.
You do it. You just do what you have to do. And how's your little girl doing today?
She is awesome. She's hanging out with her Nana right now. She just turned 7 years old. What was it? 2 days ago.
Awesome.
It's kind of interesting that when July rolls around is when my wife was diagnosed and went to the hospital. You can kind of see some misbehaving and some like anxiety pop up in her. And it's incredible to me that she experienced it so young, but she's so empathic about it that she kind of almost has some trauma associated with it. So we become a lot more forgiving and sensitive around this time of year. And it's unfortunate that she went through it, but I'm hoping that she's like her mom and comes out a lot stronger because of it.
Well, I have a feeling with parents like you two, she's going to be just fine. She sounds wonderful. Oh, Daniel, this has been so great. Is there anything else that you want to talk about? Any other tips, milestones, anything like that?
Yeah, milestones are huge. Definitely, if you're going through something like this after transplant, after remission, things like that, remember those days. And each year is something to treasure for sure and something to celebrate. You get to the point where you're considered a normal person. I think it's like 3 years after transplant. Hey, you're cancer free. And at this point, your risk isn't there. And I think that's a really huge one. It's something horrible that you have to go through, but I think it really changes your perspective on life and makes you appreciate every moment and every day a little bit more. I think that's probably what lends a little bit to my wife's drive to succeed and things like that, because she knows every moment is a gift after experiencing what she did. I definitely recommend people to, even if you don't meditate or anything like that, just try and be mindful of being in the moment and being present. Really take stock in life and think about, is what you're doing on a day-to-day basis really important to you? Does it really matter? And we certainly have after experiencing this, and life is much better after considering things like that. So you're not alone. Don't be afraid to ask for support. Don't be afraid to raise your hand. There are a lot of resources out there, and ultimately, nothing is forever. It can feel really, really terrible in a moment, but it's just a moment and everything does pass eventually. So do whatever you can to get through it.
Wow, Daniel, you have inspired me. This has just been terrific. I so appreciate your perspective and your inspiration. I love the meditation stuff. We are all about that, the gratitude, the journaling. It's all so important. Thank you for mentioning that. I just want to thank you again for being with us today. Any final thoughts? I think you did a great job already, but anything else you might want to add?
No, I'm thankful to be here and share my story. I know National Bone Marrow Transplant Link has a lot of resources. I mentioned the Cancer Buddy app, and I think for survivors, caregivers, anyone, it's a wonderful community out there, and being a part of it will definitely help you in your journey, no matter what stage you're at.
Well, thank you again, Daniel. So appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
This has been the Marrow Masters podcast. Please share this episode with someone you think would benefit from it. And don't miss future episodes of our show. Follow Marrow Masters for free on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening right now. Marrow Masters is produced for the National Bone Marrow Transplant Link. Established in 1992, the NBMT Link strives to help patients, caregivers, and families cope with the psychosocial challenges of bone marrow transplant from diagnosis through survivorship. The Marrow Masters podcast is produced by Jag Podcast Productions online at jagpodcastproductions.com.